My name is John Wood. I'm the chairman and CEO of Telos. I've been involved with the company for about 30 years now. When I took over as CEO in 1994, we had about 2,400 employees. I like to think of Telos as a start over versus a start up. We sold down to about 30 employees and started over again. So where we are today is we're in the business of cybersecurity, enterprise security, excuse me, and cloud security. And those are all big, sort of overused terms. So what I'll do is I'll explain it in more relatable terms that I think your readers or listeners or viewers will appreciate. So anytime you access any military base or any military network, you're using something called the Common Access Card. That's us. So that's the largest biometric application in the government. From there, that card, all that does is establishes, are you who you say you are? It doesn't establish whether you're trustworthy. So what we decided to do was to build a relationship in addition with the FBI, called a channeling relationship, that gave us the ability to do something called real-time database lookups. We're one of, I think, 8 in the world that have that ability. That allowed us to set up a business that does identity as a service. So we won a contract with the TSA. The contract enabled us to bid on airports across America. There have been about 105-ish competitions to identity vet the airport employees. And we've won, I think, 102 of them or something like that. And
so are you using the cameras to do this? Or is it like, are you doing how are you capturing the people as they come in to kind of their identity? Is that a visual?
What we basically do is we prepare all of the background information, the paperwork, the fingerprinting information, and then we provide that to FBI for verification and validation. TSA signs off on them, and then they become vetted employees by the airport. So we prepare the data. We're not adjudicating the data. And so from there, those credentials gave us the ability to win a job with the census, where we are responsible for doing all of the fingerprinting for census takers across America. And as an example, in the last 3 weeks, prior to this last week, we did about 400,000 fingerprints across America. The way we do that is we had a special relationship as well with Office Depot, as well as our own facilities. So we have about 800 facilities between ourselves and Office Depot where people can do that adjudication and fingerprinting. And then from there, that gave us the credential to bid on and win TSA PreCheck. So that is my identity business, and it's a fast-growing business. It's an interesting business now, given where we are with this whole COVID-19 virus that we're all dealing with. But that is a business that is one of our businesses that we deal with. The second business we have is around official message traffic. So anytime our government does any military mission, any diplomatic mission, any intelligence community mission, with the exception of the CIA, they use something called the automated message handling system, which if you were to look at it, and that's our system, if you were to look at it, it looks a lot like Gmail, except the problem with Gmail is if I send you an email and you hit return receipt, neither one of us really knows that either one of us either wrote or read the message. So what we do is something called non-repudiation, which is how we make the message legally binding. And so you know that if I tell you to take out that building and you don't, you can be prosecuted. So that's used by everybody throughout our U.S. government. The third thing that we're involved with is around misattribution. In 2003, one of the things that we did, and this is many generations ago from a technology point of view, but in 2003, we were the only guys that got something called an interim authority to operate on wireless networks. We were able to show that our wireless networks were secure. And in the end, that gave us a big leg up. So we ended up deploying our wireless networks all around the world for the Air Force and the Army Guard and the Air Guard, just everywhere. And then then we realized years later that, that's fine, but wouldn't it be better if you could create a service that operates under the premise that if you can't be seen, you can't be hacked? So we helped invent this capability called Ghost, which is a misattribution capability that we offer as a service to our customers. And what it does is something that is akin to what we did in World War II to avoid enemy detection. What we did to avoid enemy detection in World War II is something called signal hopping with our communications.
Mm-hmm.
So what we did was we invented this capability called IP hopping. So it randomly generates an IP address of where you are around the world and makes your footprint disappear. So that's used by some of the most security conscious organizations in the world. And then in the last business that we're in is sort of hardcore cybersecurity. We defend networks. We build some tools that are offensive in nature. We make them available to our customers, obviously in the military and the intelligence community. But where I think that we got a lot of growth happening in the company, and where I think we have a lot of opportunity in general, is around security and compliance automation. So for the last 20 years, we're in hundreds of thousands of networks doing security and compliance automation, providing that body of evidence to our customers that you're actually operating in a secure way. And in 2011, my chief security officer and I wrote an article about why the cloud was more secure. And at the time, it went over kind of like a lead balloon. It was kind of an early article. Then a funny thing happened. One of our customers, the CIA, made a decision that they were going to move to the cloud. And that was kind of the shot heard around the world for cloud computing. And so then I was invited into a meeting with their CIO and with one of the senior leaders at Amazon, Teresa Carlson, and whether we could do the same thing for the cloud that we've been doing on premises for the better part of, since about 2000. And make a long story short, we were able to build our capability that now we were able to do security and compliance automation in the cloud. We're able to do it in hybrid environments, and we're also able to do it on premises. And so that capability is a very, very important capability, particularly because when the president signed the cybersecurity executive order, he made 2 points. The first was he said he wanted cloud first in that executive order. But the second thing he said was he wanted to mandate the NIST framework. So we're the guys that automate the NIST framework through this security and compliance automation tool called Xacta. And unlike standards that are basically sometimes not adopted by entities outside the government, the NIST standard is definitely something that's being adopted by really anybody who's in the critical infrastructure world.
And what does NIST stand for?
National Institution of Standards and Technologies, I think.
Okay.
Right.
Excellent.
The NIST standard is made up of about 1,100 controls. So let me put this into meaningful data points for you and your listeners, readers.
Yeah.
When there are two clouds that the CIA uses for the intelligence community. One is called C2S, which stands for Commercial Cloud Services. The other is called SC2S, which stands for Secret Commercial Cloud Services. When the CIA had to get what's called the ATO, the authority to operate, they had to show that they were able to provide the body of evidence, that they were able to show that they're operating in a secure way under these standards. And that manual effort took over 2 years. When they adopted our product, which is called Xacta 360, and they pointed it towards the secret cloud called SC2S, that took about 65 days.
Hmm.
And then as Amazon provides new services to these clouds, those services also have to get authorized as to that they're able to operate in that sort of secure world. As an example, when they authorized workspaces, because they're using this automation, it took just under 2 weeks. So you see the time going from a long time manually, because it's a lot of controls, to the time being reduced quite substantially. Because when you think about what we do in general, what we do is we use automation to make our customers more secure. So whereas a lot of companies out there invest very heavily in sales and marketing, what we did was we invested very heavily in research and development. So we have 3 development shops, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, and one in the Philippines. And that gives us a really, really big leg up because, our customers are massive in general. And so all of them have legacy, all of them are moving to the cloud, all of them have hybrid environments. And that's why a tool like Xacta 360 is very valuable to them.
So talk a little bit about the value of this new partnership with what you're doing with Xacta.
Sure. So do you know ST? Do you know ST Engineering? Do you know them?
I don't.
So ST Engineering, to put it into plain English, is the Lockheed Martin of ASEAN. So they are a massive contractor like Lockheed Martin here in the U.S. They build airports, they build train stations, they build they're involved in a bunch of cloud-related activity now with not just Singapore, but all throughout the Middle East and Asia. They're a really big organization. And so when we started doing work, when I started going over to Singapore and with my team, and Amazon really was out there showing how our stuff was important to them in the U.S., I think the Singapore government became very interested to see whether or not they could apply the NIST framework and automation and tools to their own government. And when we decided to do that, we knew that the best thing to do was to work through whoever the strongest partners were. And so we were introduced to ST Engineering, and really at the behest of the Singapore government, who thinks very highly of them in general.
So since you are doing a lot of this kind of secure work, what kind of limits does your company have on other governments that you can work for? There must be some, or maybe there isn't, some limits on who you can work with?
No, of course there are. We have something, we follow export control rules. And so we have to seek permission to sell our solutions in various nation states around the world. And Singapore is, a very close ally to the U.S. government.
So does that create any limitations to your growth opportunities, or not really?
Not really. I mean, when you think about it, I guess so. But I mean, theoretically, yes, so theoretically.
Yeah.
But from a practical point of view, I don't think so. There's a lot of places that we can sell our solutions. What we just have to make sure is that, in the case of when you really think about it, Ghost, which is our misattribution solution, and Xacta 360 are sort of exactly the opposite. Xacta 360 is all about, providing all the artifacts, the entire body of evidence, all the documentation, and, so that if something happens, you can quickly go in and see through the audit logs and through all the controls where there was a problem and why the problem occurred. Whereas if you think about Ghost leaves absolutely no footprint. So you can't tell where you've been. So there is no audit trail. So you got to be careful who you sell Ghost to, because it can be used for good and bad. So we're very careful who we sell Ghost to.
So with these programs and partnerships that you have, especially with the Amazon, i- are you able to convert this, and have you done that into more of commercial applications as well?
Yes. So in the case of both of the two tools I mentioned earlier,
Hmm.
there are commercial use cases as well as government use cases. I think anybody who's involved in critical infrastructure
Hmm.
uh, have interest in either capability. Just imagine for a minute if you could hide your entire corporate network so that there was no, again, if you can't see the IP addresses, you can't hack into them, basically, long story short.
Right.
So, I definitely think that there's applicability for both solutions commercially. And that may be the reason why, as an example, after we aligned ourselves with Amazon and with the agency, we were approached by Microsoft, by Azure, to
Hmm.
build a native instance of Exacta inside of their security and compliance infrastructure, which is called Blueprint, which they
Right.
would then sell around the world to all of their sovereign clouds. So that's another, if you will, channel partner that we see as being very important to the company.
Right. And how about with, everyone, and with COVID going on, we're on Zoom. I'm sure your company is doing collaboration all over the place. I don't know if you saw, but I live in Massachusetts. There was a school that got their Zoom hacked twice each day by somebody. Is there any benefit that for these companies that are needing to be more remote now for the next few months? Is there something that you guys could be offering to them through maybe Rackspace or someone like that that could improve their safety and security of having this kind of remote and collaborative environments?
I think, as an example, Ghost is a great solution for stuff like that because,
Hmm.
again, it's a misattribution solution. It works under the assumption that if you can't be seen, you can't be hacked, and the whole notion of IP hopping means that it's hopping in and out of various clouds around the world. So it's a capability that has very little latency,
Hmm.
and it's inexpensive to implement. So if that's something if that's a concern to customers, that's a good tool for them to use.
Interesting. So yeah, so someone in like the education departments may be interested in something like that because they're trying to protect now a lot more data, student data that can be accessed.
You mean like PII kind of things, right? So
Hmm.
yes, well, the issue with education um, in general is that um, it's not centralized, right?
Hmm.
And each entity has their own way of doing things, and they're kind of slow moving. I'm hoping that uh, what ends up happening is people see the value of working together in times like this, and they see opportunities to pool resources. I was listening to Governor Como, who has been doing his daily briefings
Yeah.
on New York. And one of the things he did was he talked about how he brought all the hospitals together and they're sharing their ventilators back and forth and where they have the most need. So I'm hopeful that some of this, thinking about this new normal, whatever that means, will cause opportunities for organizations to think about, well, how can I do this differently? My organization in the past, we're virtually all either on site somewhere or at some customer location. And, I'm guessing at least 70% of my workforce right now around the world is working remotely. Now, there's some tasks that we are involved with that are classified that we just couldn't, we agreed with our customer that we could not declassify, but there's
Hmm.
other product that we do that we've absolutely declassified, which has allowed our workforce to be able to get their jobs done in an unclassified environment, i.e. in their home.
Right. Well, that's one of the areas that we've been focusing on is trying to figure out where that this new paradigm has been created and where it'll stick. And you mentioned Governor Cuomo with the hospitals. I think the telemedicine world is going to be the one that I'm hoping will be impacted in a positive way at the end of all this.
You know, it's funny you mentioned telemedicine. My youngest daughter, who's 6, is a miracle. She was born with a very rare heart defect called
Mm-hmm.
D-dash transposition of the great arteries. So
Mm-hmm.
you're supposed to be like this, the great arteries over your heart, but hers were like this. And what that basically meant was, well, when she was in uterus, she was perfectly fine, but as soon as she was delivered, she would turn blue and die.
Mm-hmm.
What they were able to do is this miracle surgery. Remember, her heart was probably the size of a little bit smaller than a walnut.
Right.
And so they were able to cross the arteries back over again. And the reason I mentioned that in this particular call, and I'm sure she's psyched I'm doing that, is that we had a telemedicine call today with her surgeon down at Children's National. And you're right, there's a lot of stuff you can do remotely. However, in the end, there are certain things you just can't do remotely. So there's going to be the requirement, whatever the industry you're in, to meet, you know, as individuals. The question I have is whether or not things like conferences will ever be the same again. You know, we've all been to, I'm sure, hundreds of conferences. And through the end of this year, I don't think we're going to see any conferences at all. And I'm curious to see how the conference world changes, you know, as a result of this terrible pandemic that we're all dealing with.
Yeah, that's a fair point as well. Well, this has been interesting. I kind of been enjoying getting to know what your company does and, you know, figuring out how it's getting deployed. This is very cool. So congratulations.
Thank you.
One last thing I like to do, you know, when you have a partnership that you're celebrating is what did you drink when you toasted that win?
So I when we toasted the win, in the end, I think for me, a nice glass of red wine would be always wonderful to toast with.
Nice.
Some of my partners at ST Engineering enjoy tea versus alcoholic beverages. So in the end, it's whatever floats your boat, if you will. I will say this: we are extremely excited about the opportunity of working with ST Engineering. They are a world-class outfit. They're a wonderful partner, and they're a trusted partner. So if any of your viewers are considering doing work in Singapore and places outside of Singapore, they really should reach out to ST Engineering. They're a very good outfit. I really, really appreciate working with them.
That's great. Well, that's good to hear, and I really appreciate the time.
No problem.
So thank you, everybody. This has been Jeff Mesnick with the Channel Marketing Journal, and we've been learning more about this great program here. So thank you.
Thank you, and stay healthy.
You too. And I'm just going to cut 3, 2, 1. So I got one thing.